now I am standing between you and coffee, but under of Green Legacy Hiroshima, because as some of you know, I took a lot of the lessons from the Afghan Fellowship and applied it in the Green Legacy Hiroshima. So I learned from you the idea of team building, a vision greater than ourselves, working with very different kinds of people. I had been all my life an international civil servant. I learned to work with NGOs, with municipalities, with gardeners, with botanic gardens, and with a worldwide community of lovers of plants. And the person who made that possible, she took the idea and made it real. The Homera of Green Legacy Hiroshima is Tomoko Watanabe.
本当に皆さん、マイク入っていますか？大丈夫ですか？ありがとうございます。じゃあ、ありがとうございます。皆さん、懐かしい方たちに会えて。I want to talk some word in English. So sorry, my poor English, but my bottom of heart to talk to you. And this is a paper. Since the start of the invasion of Ukraine, I've started to think about the long history of war and conflict that the human has been involved in. As some countries have risen to power, while others have seen their power wane, what remained the same? The waves of the ocean crashing against the shores, birds singing their morning songs, and the leaves of the trees swing in the wind. Nature and the natural world remain the same. In the ruins of Hiroshima, after the atomic bomb destroyed the city, what gave my father and mother, as well as many others, the strength to continue living were the small green sprout that emerged through the crack of the destroyed city. I learned that when the people are trying to live with hope, when there is none, what sustains us in the nature and the greenery that surround us. The people who taught me the value of the A-bombed trees was Nasrin Azumi and the tree doctor Chikara Horiguchi, as well as those who work at botanical gardens. Nasrin always says, there isn't anyone who hates greenery. Meeting and learning from these people has and will always be something that I treasure. I also treasure the existence of the A-bombed trees and those who protect them and tell their story. This is something that I want to share with the world. The group achieving this is Green Legacy Hiroshima. In these difficult times, I find that I'm about to lose the strength to move forward. I go and meet the trees. The trees whisper to me, don't get frustrated. Walk forward with strength, one step at a time. There is always a way forward. I would like to express my sincere regard for the publishing of this book. This is an amazing book. I agree, amazing book, which shows the culture and friendship are eternal. I believe the trees are always by our side and are looking over us. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my feeling today. Congratulations on the launch of the wonderful book. Thank you so much. Thank you.
For sessions 1 and 2, I don't know how we will survive sessions 3 and 4 because emotions are already running high. Many memories, reminded of many memories, rejuvenated by seeing many old friends, but actually also inspired by many new ideas. So thank you. It's like you've been laboring away at something and you don't realize that it has had this kind of effect. And thank you for reminding me that what we've been doing here has been really so important. And all, so we're moving to session 4, and the lead-ins will be Mihoko Kumamoto, Yuji Uesugi, both of whom are in Tokyo right now, and Lorne here. The fellowship beyond Afghanistan, what lessons for UNITAR's other post-conflict efforts? You have been hearing about some of them this morning, the work in South Sudan, the work in Iraq, the work in Syria, more recent work generally in the Middle East. And we wanted to keep the longer title because precisely because so much of international development assistance has either become merely humanitarian aid, or so much of it has become imbued with military intervention these past 2 decades. And we just wanted to zoom in again on what does it really mean to do international development, and what were some of the principles that we learned from the work in Afghanistan. So now I would like to give the floor to Professor Yuji Uesugi. Yuji was one of our very, very first partners. And he has remained in touch over the years. And we have continued to work with him and his other colleague, Shinoda Sensei, in various capacities. We turned to Yuji when we wanted to have a really qualitative assessment of the book. It was a tough exercise to read him, I can tell you that, but every part of it was so right on the mark, and I learned so much, Yuji, thanks to you, to have a better perspective of the work that we all did together. Yuji is joining us with his class from Waseda University in Tokyo. I apologize to your students for being late. We set a very bad example of international programs because international programs are always late. So with all my apologies, Yuji, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nasreen. About 20 years ago, when I was still early 30s, I was privileged to be part of this Afghan fellowship program. Even though I was a junior scholar, I was given a role as a mentor, resource person, and sometimes lecturer. And in this particular book project, I was given a task to evaluate the program. And Humera posed the rhetorical questions, was it all the waste? And obviously the answer is no, but because I was asked to be critical, my answer follows but. And today's task I was given is to come up with some of the lessons learned for other post-conflict situations. So what I would like to do is to highlight 2 points from the point of view of peace building. The first thing is we all know that local ownership is a key to successful peace building. So I would like to scrutinize Afghan fellowship program from the point of view of local ownership and its relevance to or implications to other cases. The second point is about the importance of reaching out to so-called gatekeepers. A gatekeeper is the one who are illiberal. Probably they are like religious leaders, elders, those who appreciate the traditional values, and they could be sometimes an obstacle for applying to new approaches. And with these 2 kind of a point, I would like to elaborate in my further talks. First, this Afghan program was aimed to transform the individuals in terms of their mindset. And the assumption is that if we capacitate and provide them a right kind of a mindset, then these individuals will behave differently. And this behavioral change will lead to institutional transformation. And later on, these would be integrated into so-called social transformation. An overall assessment of the Afghan program, I would argue that individual transformation has been successful, and we all just witnessed these actual example of successfully transformed individuals. And also institutional reform also successful. But at the same time, we can all see some of the societal transformation has not yet reached to the completion. So I would argue that the system of governance are still not yet fully transformed. And it is always difficult and maybe time consuming for society to transform itself. So just the 20 years of intervention may not be long enough or sufficient enough. But at the same time, I would like to kind of scrutinize some of the reasons why this societal transformation has yet to be accomplished. Of course, it's very easy to blame everything on the overarching intervention goals, which is combating terrorism or war on terror. And it's very easy to blame everything on these US policies. And of course, the macro factors, such a macro factors has a huge impact on this Afghan fellowship program, despite the fact as a program itself, it was successful, but its impact to the rest of the society has faced critical challenges due to this overall or macro factors. But at the same time, I would like also scrutinize some of the micro point of view. The key element to the success of this program is obviously the program has been able to attract brightest and best candidate in Afghan community. At the same time, that being said, that key success factor could have been one of the reasons for shortcoming. I'm saying this in front of a lot of fellows, so it's kind of a challenging thing to me. Mariam has said that now they have to live in the imposed realities. And she also emphasized that the Afghan fellowship community were resilient and they were ambitious to change the society. This kind of illustrates some of the existing boundaries between us and them. And those who are on the other side, probably they have caused some of the challenges for this societal transformation to happen. Obviously, it was not the mandate of a goal of the fellowship to even engage with so-called illiberal leaders, because a group of Afghans who are signed associated with program are all liberal lovers and peace lovers. But one of the major, probably critical challenge for this program is how to reach out to gatekeepers who are influential in the communities, who are usually religious leaders or tribal leaders and elders, or even the warlords. We have been able to identify the gap between the fellowship mindset with traditional customs and norms. And it will be ideal the fellowship become a bridge between these fellowship mindset with the traditional customs and norms. So this is probably one lesson learned, how we are able to reach out to those who are usually not been assigned to these kind of liberal opportunities, because they will become a major obstacle when society are going to transform. So that's first lessons that I would like to emphasize. The second lesson is more positive lessons, that the local ownership, a lot of international organizations advocate for local ownership, but in fact, it is very challenging to actually come up with a very fruitful engagement called local ownership. But this program demonstrated a way that how outsider can work with a local. I wrote in the book, Nasrin, Humela, and Sharapiya are the three musketeers. And I really would like to emphasize their mindset and their approaches helped this entire program to be more respecting a local ownership. And I think this kind of practice should be emulated in other post-conflict peace building endeavor. And I also would like to highlight the role of Afghan fellows they played. After their being fellows, they are serving as coaches and resource persons, and their commitment and the way they actually involved a true example of local ownership. So to wrap up, my main argument is that one of the challenges that we have to overcome is how to reach out to the other side. The second lessons that we can learn from maybe this Afghan fellowship approaches of designing program and human resource development could be a great model for other similar endeavors to be emulated. And thank you very much for your attention, and my talk is now over. Thanks.
Thank you, Yuji. Actually, I remember exactly 20 years ago, you told me something about the Japanese-Korean tensions, and already then you were thinking about understanding the other side. And what you told me, and I will not share it now because of interest of time, but what you told me put a light on understanding the feelings of Koreans towards Japan and the feelings of the Japanese towards Korea. So I see that you have just gone on to evolve. That's a very deep idea. I give the floor now to Lorne John for guiding us into the next panel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be very brief in the interest of time and my own interest in hearing from the rest of you about reflections on this. Over the career of many projects around the world, including both Ukraine and Russia, Northern Europe, Southern Europe, Latin America, South Asia, I'd have to say, for me, one of the key pieces for all of us as we undertake a project, not just of this scale, but of any scale, is patience. How you cannot rush into a project with a plan. You probably have to have one for the funder, but you also have to create the project as it proceeds. And that's on the basis, as Yuji just told us, feedback and input from our partners locally, but also about best practice. So that requires a maturity sometimes that eludes us on the basis of the requirements of funding agencies that include budgets, but also include timelines. The most successful projects I can relate to, and there's probably 3 of dozens, were in Bangladesh, Latin America, and Afghanistan, this project. And I would say the common element in those is continuity. Continuity of people, of Sakut, of Gumara and Nasreen, but also of fellows who devoted themselves to the time and energy required to represent this project locally, to be spokespersons for what was working, and to be honest with us about what was not working. I think that was really crucial as a lesson for us in moving forward. The other thing I would like to just point out real quickly is the absolute requirement for us to demonstrate in real terms our respect for our partners, to overcome this notion of colonialism, to overcome this notion of disparity between the North and the South, the East and the West, the wealthy and the low-income countries. But to recognize that we are all human beings first and foremost, that our passion and our compassion for one another has to be at the root of everything we choose to do. So patience, compassion, and the need for spokespersons who are won over to a shared vision. So I'll leave it at that, Madam Chairman, so that we can hear from the others.
Thank you, Lorne. I think continuity has really been a key for all successful programs we've done here. And I would add to that the institutional continuity, the continuity of Hiroshima Prefecture for funding. That's really something that stands out for me because I haven't seen it elsewhere. And the continuity of UNITAR, the institution of UNITAR that provided us that framework. So thank you for reminding us of that. So without further ado, we move to the next session. Fawad John, you're again on the spot. As you said, you moved from the critique to one of them. So please tell us your illumination thoughts in this process. Over to you, Fawad.
Sure, thank you. Well, let me just share a slide because not that I really like this slide, but this gives me, I'm a visual person, it gives me some context to talk about. So this is an excerpt from the World or Global Humanitarian Assistance Report of this year, which was released just last week on the Global Refugee Day or World Refugee Day. So there are a couple of things that I see this that is as a context that's relevant to the conversation we have today. First, the trend, as you can see from 2018 to 2022. So the report was released this year, but it's the latest data they used was 2022. As you can see, sadly, from almost 200 million people in need, we've reached to over 400 million people in need. That's almost doubled in the course of 5 years. So that's a one trend. The second thing is that a term that's now becoming more popular particularly in the global health community, and that is the 4 C's. And that includes the conflict. A number of other friends talked about it, and it's reflected in this slide. Climate. So out of this 400 plus million people that are in need, about 58% of them are because of the climate-related calamities. So that's the second C. The third one is COVID. As you can see, this pink area. So that COVID alone added 200 million people in need to the mix in 2020. So that's the third one, and the fourth one is the cost of living or poverty. So these are the 4 C's that we can see and their impact in the world that we live. So that's kind of a context in which we are now operating. On the other hand, resources that are becoming available or are available to respond to this need is either shrinking or stays plateaued or stagnated. So we hardly respond to about 52% of the needs that we have globally with the resources available. So that's kind of I wanted to use this slide as a context. So why I'm sharing that? So in such situation that we live and we work as development or humanitarian practitioners, the role of programs such as UNITAR Fellowship Program becomes even more critical and important because of a number of factors. First of all, its relevance. Professor Yuji talked about this, the local aspect of this program, its responsiveness and relevance to the needs of us, the fellows, and the needs of the sectors in which we worked. That really makes programs like this relevant and replicable in other contexts. And that's why it is being replicated, right? So the model or at least an inspiration of that is being used in other contexts. The second thing is, in my view, the efficient model of it. I mean, I don't know, I haven't seen the evaluation, but at least what I remember from my engagement in the program, that the program really tried to keep the cost down. So it becomes a sustainable program and partnerships are not exhausted with the high cost of the program. And then it's brought partnerships and dynamism that were mentioned a few times today as well. So the broad partnerships brought more talent, more interest, more at times also fresh blood to the mix that kept the momentum. But also the dynamism is really relevant, particularly as we deal with more fragility, not only just conflict or there are other types of fragilities, economic, environmental, and other types of social and others. So for all of these reasons, UNITAR fellowship program for Afghanistan and like of them become more relevant because we can deliver high impact programs with low resources in a longer period of time with higher impact. So this way we can kind of close bridge the gap between the needs and the available resources. I was lucky enough in the past couple of years to be involved in the Iraq, Lebanon, and Egypt fellowship programs through UNITAR. So thanks for allowing me to contribute to that program. And what I've learned from my engagement there as an instructor and mentor in a few years is that the context, while contexts are different in many ways, but there are a lot of similarities, particularly seeing it from a fragility point of view. The kinds of fragility factors that the countries deal with are very similar to, or quite similar. So for that reason, the lessons learned from this program are quite relevant in those contexts. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Fawad Jan. I can confirm that it was very low cost. We kept it that way. Nigel?
Thank you. I mean, as we've heard today, I mean, I think part of the success is really about the fact that we inspired people. It's, you know, we have a dream to have a stronger, better Afghanistan. That's why we have, you know, comments from the mentors, from the resource people, why they gave of their time into the programs, because, you know, a plan is very important, as you said, Lorne, but, you know, it's not, I have a plan, it's, I have a dream. And, you know, that's why everyone was, you know, hundreds of participants and, you know, dozens and dozens of mentors around the world. I think that's really inspiring. But I mean, I think as we're looking forward, as has been highlighted just by Fawad, it's the global situation is horrendous. You know, I was looking at statistics, millions of Afghans are not having enough food. I mean, that's steps backwards from what, you know, what we were working towards. And I mean, I think it's important to keep in mind the triple nexus of the peace, development, and humanitarian. And unfortunately, the world is sort of focusing just on the humanitarian at the moment. There's, you know, funding to the UN and NGOs around the world is being cut, even to humanitarian to a large extent. But it's also, but that's the only one that's sort of been maintained to some extent, and that's not sustainable in the long term. So it's really important that we can need to address this. And you know, since what happened in 2021 in August, and seeing what happened in so many of our friends becoming asylum seekers and refugees and leaving Afghanistan, you know, that's really, I mean, for me as an outsider, you know, it was heartbreaking to see, you know, our friends like Sukut and so many of our alumni just, you know, in such this dire straits. You know, the world needs to be better. I mean, and as I think, Lorne, you mentioned, the world is not better at the moment. It's becoming more insular. It's becoming it's going backwards. But, you know, I think the question of is it worth it is absolutely yes. I think Sukut said at the beginning, it's that every person we've trained can go and has that multiplier effect going out now beyond and making an impact. So absolutely, I think everything that we do in the past and everything we do in the future has meaning. And I mean, even just, you know, I'm just personally, I mean, after what happened with, you know, and working with so many friends, you know, asylum seekers and refugees, later this year, I'm going to change agency and work with the UN with some refugee camps in Jordan, because I think, you know, it's important to be, you know, we shouldn't need them, but we do have them, so we know we need to support them. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, for reminding us of the facts on the ground. Jennifer, can I call on Jennifer?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you have
We're
5
good?
minutes, Jennifer. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Nazreen. So Humera asked me, this is a little bit of a different take on this session, to talk a little bit about my experiences or lessons from the fellowship that I was able to use in my own development work in other countries. And then she also asked me to comment a little bit about sort of where humanitarian assistance / international development is going and some of the forward trends. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to discuss both these things. So I think some of you know that I've been lucky enough, really as a result, frankly, in part from the fellowship, to have a job as an international advisor with the U.S. Treasury Department, and also working with the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. State Department, advising governments all over the world, mostly on budget work, on planning, on oversight, these types of things. And so I've been able to really use so many skills and experience, I think all of the above from the fellowship in my daily work. And just a few examples, I'll talk about the job, but then I also want to talk a little bit more broadly about how just even in life, I feel like I've been able to apply so many of these amazing lessons. So for instance, I had a project in the Gambia. I was working with a budget office there, and they had a very dysfunctional organizational structure, and they had a lot of problems getting teams to work together, et cetera. And I was able to help bring them together. We did a mini DISC assessment. I thought Michael would be very excited to hear that, and even did some skill building work with team building, et cetera. And so I definitely was able to put to work some of the lessons learned and some of the skills directly with that particular government. Also worked with them on the concept of servant leadership. And interestingly enough, that was new to most of the people that I started working with, but it really resonated. And that made me really, really happy, because it's so often, I think, in ministries and people that do this type of work, sometimes they forget that they are there to serve others, that you know, they are public servants. And I think kind of bringing that concept to them, I think, was really, really powerful. I think the other big thing I was able to do was to actually take some of the lessons learned in terms of the development of monitoring and evaluation systems and apply them to my own office. In 2018, I switched gears from being an international advisor to actually working with the Treasury Department to develop a new monitoring and evaluation system. And funny enough, just to start even thinking, even brainstorming on what we thought monitoring templates should look like, I went back to UNITAR, and I remembered the last monitoring template that I had helped develop was for the Bees project. If anybody remembers the Bamyan Bees project from 2017, I actually found that template that we developed, and I used that as the starting point for our framework. And that has become, funny enough, sort of the key sort of structure of our logical models for the U.S. Treasury Department's international assistance monitoring and evaluation system. So that's kind of a cool little side legacy. I think maybe more important, though, than my Treasury work, what I've really been able to use, the skills and things that I've learned from the fellowship, I think in a really powerful way in international development, is in 2018, I got the incredible opportunity to become an adjunct professor teaching a global capstone program in international development at the Elliott School of International Affairs at George Washington University. And through this role, I essentially facilitate the development and implementation of small team projects. So a lot of overlap, to be honest, between kind of our model of what we were doing in terms of the UNITAR fellowship with our small teams, developing project concepts, and then really trying to work all the way through implementation. So through that process, I think, there's so many different skills I feel like I've applied in that sense. I mean, some of them have just been really practical skills, like teaching students how to pitch projects to clients, things like that. But I think the other thing is just that if I hadn't had the opportunity to be a mentor with a fellowship and work with so many different people from so many different cultures, I think I would have been at a disadvantage because my students are literally from all over the world. And you know, to me, it was the most. It didn't even feel unusual when I stepped foot in that classroom for the first time. Wasn't at all unusual to be listening to different languages, different accents, et cetera. And I feel like so much of that is from my experience with the fellowship. And I think both my teaching and also just working with the international development with all of these different ministries and departments and things, a huge lesson I got from the fellowship that was just mentioned is that I always see everyone I'm working with, whether they're my students or the other people that I'm helping advise, as equals. I see them as equals, I see them as team members, and I see them as we are part of something bigger and we have bigger goals, and this isn't about hierarchy, et cetera. And I feel like that was such an important lesson I got out of the fellowship.
Thank you, Jennifer. We'll have to wrap up. 1 more minute.
Okay, 1 more minute. So the only other thing I really wanted to mention was that we haven't really talked too much about in terms of helping Afghans here in the US or in other countries that we were kind of mentioned the refugees and sort of displaced people. But I think that's something I have a team that I'm working with here in the Dallas area with refugees. And one of the things we started talking about, because this was kind of discussed, is no one's talking about longer term development. Everybody's talking about immediate assistance, even here in the US and in Canada and other countries. So we've already started thinking about looking at elements from the fellowship, from the UNITAR fellowship, to see if there's any ways we could apply some of that to create a longer term professional development and empowerment program for Afghans that are here, whether outside of their country, whether it's the US or again, wherever they are. And and this is just, we've just started these conversations, but I think longer term, it would be really interesting, Michael, Miriam, whoever else, to start thinking about this in a bigger picture. Are there elements we can take from the UNITAR Afghanistan Fellowship that we could actually start to apply to create some type of professional development program, empowerment program for all of the displaced Afghans? So I'm planting that seed. I know we don't have any more time to talk about it today, but I would love to continue those discussions if there's a moment sometime.
Thank you, Jennifer. Actually, a lot of people are like brooding over that seed. So I think it's on a lot of people's minds. Thank you for that. And with this, I give the floor to Najib Sabory. Many of you know him. He was a star. He was and is very handsome. He is now working in Japan. Najib Jan, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I was traveling with my wife and my kids, and my daughter Aisha. She's 8 years old, and she was very excited about traveling to Hiroshima. And I told him, you don't need to be overexcited when you are traveling somewhere. You just keep it very simple, and that the normal excitement is okay. But actually, I was more than excited than her, and plus emotionally. So I was coming to see the treasury of the 20 years, those who contributed, to those who gave birth to the UNITAR Fellowship Program, and those who raised this program. So it was a really overexcitement for me to come and see all those who were engaged after a long time. It's actually, I've been engaged in this program from the last 16 years. And I've been engaged since today. So still, it was a big event. Today's event was really big. Let me bring my own definition of UNITAR Fellowship. That how do I see the UNITAR Afghanistan Fellowship? It is more of values for me. What are the values that are in this program that it has attracted experts, attracted a lot of leaders, a lot of volunteers? So what it has in it for me, I've listed four of those values that really matters for me. The first one is, that's the most important, is the sincerity of those who are involved in this program. So that's the core for this program. And the devotion is another value that I really value. The trust, the wisdom, and the humanity. These are the values that that I look at UNITAR. Every time I hear about UNITAR, I look at those values. So this is what matters to me. Yeah, UNITAR is 20 years old now, and I've been engaged, today. Hiroshima, UNITAR Hiroshima office is 20 years old, and the Afghanistan fellowship is the same, it's 20 years old, and I've been engaged in this program for 16 years. And being engaged in this program and kept engaged, actually. So there should be a source of power, what are inside that keeps engaged individuals like me, but more importantly, individuals who are like Michael Force, David, and a lot of Sukut, of course, keeping him engaged. So there is something that it keeps them engaged. So what are those factors that gives a program sustainability and keeps those individuals and ties them together for a longer time? I think the first thing is the way it is designed. Those who are initially engaged in the planning stage, they come up with a design that is sustainable. So the design of this program is the key factor. That so it gives a longer life, and it gives continuity for the program. And it is, like Jennifer just mentioned, that it is not a short-term program. It should be something that gives lives and continual improvement of those who are engaged in this program. And of course, the leadership who are leading this program. That's very important. I've been seeing in this program that it is not only led by those who initiated the program, but this is a source of identifying the leaders and raising the leaders and leading by them. So the UNITAR program was very good in this process. The process of selecting the fellows, the mentors, and then they give them opportunity to become the resource person, and then go further and be engaged in the program. So this is something unique to this program. So if any other program want to, if the others want to learn from this program, so these are the qualities that could be further replicated in other programs. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Najib John, as always to the point, and you're right to be excited, and Aisha too. Sharapiya John, can we call on your dear face again? Over to you.
Thank you. I will come back to the topic of the session. So when we talk about post-conflict efforts, we usually talk about increase of justice, increase of peace. So when we talk about justice, we talk about justice in human relations, justice in access to resources, transparency, process of participation. When we talk about peace, we are talking about reduction of violence. So, but both of those processes are involving, they are focusing on process of change. So, and if we want some change, this process of change to be a good process or to go into a right direction, we need to have a capacity, on-site capacity, to make decisions in a constantly changing environment. Because when we talk about post-conflict, the country is changing constantly, dynamically. So we need this capacity, and what Afghan Fellowship did actually, it's created these capacities. So it might not have a lot of resources. It was very modest program, might not have many staff, personnel involved. Maybe not so many beneficiaries, participants. Finally, if you look over the length of the program and the number of people, if you divide it into months, for example, but what it did, it's created capacity of the people in the ground, and people who can make decisions based on the changing situation of their countries. So when we talk about fellows, they not only they were living in the changing situation of their countries, they also lived in the changing situation, changing roles by themselves. So they moved from fellows to coaches, from coaches to resource persons, etc., etc. They were mentors for other countries as well. So they created this special approach. The fellowship created this special approach when the capacity of people on site developed, and these people were equipped with the possibility to take decisions. It might be decisions on their family members, it might be decisions on the department level, unit level, organizational level, even country level, I don't ministry level, for example, if we are talking about, for example, Musaka or some other stuffs. So this is what fellowship is created, and it is very important, as well as important humanitarian aid and military intervention, I think, because when we talk about, I cannot have capacity building or sit in the class if I'm hungry. So that's that comes to the part of the humanitarian aid. And if there is no security, I cannot also go and attend. Many Afghans did, and it was heartbreaking to not only listen to them, but also reading books. So when there are many examples of that. So coming back to, I agree with Uesugi's comments about maybe we should have been involved, try to involve Jirgas leaders or some other local gatekeepers. But the thing is, we were not allowed to go outside of Kabul. We were very limited. Our capacity to move probably was very limited by security situation. I'm not sure how, if the Afghan was improving in security faster or maybe more steadily, maybe we could have thought about it. But I think considering a circumstance that we also had to go out of Kabul to do workshops, which had its benefit in itself. But I see it a little bit difficult, not impossible. Maybe we should have thought about it, but I like actually that probably that's one of the points that we could consider in the future, or UNITAR can consider in the future. I also was talking about it. I also want to mention that I'm not sure how many Afghan fellows are working at Afghanistan now, at the Taliban government. I'm sure there are out of 500, I don't know, maybe Sakut can tell me more exact numbers. But what I'm sure about is they already have this UNITAR fellowship mindset. And I think they can have a better decisions, they can have a make change on the spots. And I think it wasn't a waste. So just to wrap up. So that's the response. It wasn't a waste for me personally. I think it wasn't waste for fellows. And I don't think it was a waste for Afghanistan, because we still have people with a fellowships mindset inside the countries, and they can actually probably make it better in one way or another. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharapiya Jan, and thank you for emphasizing the obvious, the need for adapting to change. I do want to remind that Sharapiya, if you didn't know, embodies that herself, educated under the Soviet system, then working in the independent Kazakhstan, then coming to Japan, getting her PhD, becoming fluent in Japanese, then learning to work with the UN system through UNITAR, then accompanying me and many fellows on Afghan programs, and then taking off with her family back to Chile, and now being extremely effective and impactful, having learned Spanish, of course. Well, you can see why Humaira and I are so in awe of Sharapiya, but I think that was one of the key features of the fellowship that she highlighted, the adaptability and accepting that change is massive. Thank you everyone for session 3.